It's the NBA playoffs, and like every year, we have the same story. The frauds that choke, the unlucky injured team, the favorites that breeze their way through, and the topic of today's video, the Cinderella story. Every year, there's a team that goes on a magical run through the playoffs. The Miami Heat had a couple, the Nuggets had one in the bubble, and this year, the playoff princess title has been awarded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. But it isn't the team that I'm focusing on in this vid. Today, I'm going to focus individually and talk about the player, or as I should say, the perception of the player. In the bubble, the first miracle run from the Miami Heat, they received a plethora of support from multiple different avenues. Jimmy Butler rose to a superstar level, Duncan Robinson came out of nowhere and went inferno, Bam Adebayo played elite, and Tyler Hero caught the attention of a lot of NBA fans. He was instrumental in the finals run that the Heat had, as he routinely dropped incredible performances for them en route to said finals appearance. In the NFL, I distinctly remember Gabe Davis having an incredible 4-touchdown game in that absolute thriller against the Chiefs. I remember more distinctly Gabe Davis being considered a very high-level wide receiver 2 and potentially a wide receiver 1, and he was pushed into a lot of conversations that some would consider inappropriate. And this year we have Anthony Edwards. He's the guy that has exploded these playoffs and caught the world by storm. He has aura, he's the next MJ, he's a killer. All these labels, this status, this praise has been placed on his shoulders, all from one playoff run. Now, to be clear, this isn't an Anthony Edwards hate video, but there's a lot of narratives that we hear floating around annually during the season across every sport, and they usually come from one place, the playoffs. And right now, I'm gonna question, why is that? Now, obviously, you may say, well, it's the playoffs, duh. And while I get what you're saying, my response to that is, well, it's still weird. Weird how 4 or 5 games of play can completely shift your perception of a player, positively or negatively. And it's obvious the reason why. The playoffs define the sport. They mean so much more. There are less teams putting more spotlight on each matchup, and they're the final lasting impression so many NBA fans have on the player. When you have brighter lights, more attention, and however you play being the final influence on fans' decision, then it's a no-brainer on how these narratives start. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all either. It's part of the reason the playoffs are so special. But just because it's fun doesn't mean it's right. I'll head over to Anthony Edwards. His first 6 playoff games had people on their knees praising him. You have Stephen A. Smith slurping his shit literally every morning, and it's fluttering all over TikTok, and him getting face of the league talk. And I'm not saying he was bad. He was sensational in those games, but it seems like people forget he isn't perfect, not even close. Who's being spoken about as a top 5 player, a guy who could easily be top 10 all time, but he's not. And we saw that in later games. Ain has been ice cold these past few games and has gotten eliminated from the playoffs. And through that, we've seen some of his flaws as a player poke through. He's a great player, obviously. He's unbelievable, but he's not the guy you guys saw in those games, which is the problem with playoff ball. Consistency, or lack thereof. When I say this, I mean the playoffs are such a small sample size that it doesn't really distinctly prove anything about anyone as a player. Now, this is more of a problem in the NFL since there are only 4 games, but the power and hold these games have over NFL fans' minds and judgment is inconceivable. One hot stretch from Gabe Davis had him firmly put inside top 20 discussions for an entire offseason, and a stretch of game from Anthony Edwards has him given a label that he'll have to work very hard to scrub off. Not that he'll want to or anything. Even now, as he's ice cold and playing horrible, the narrative around him is still the same. The regular season stretches over 82 games, and it's less exciting, obviously, but having a consistent stream of unbiased information gives you the exact type of notion of what sort of player they are. And Ant is the perfect player to fall in this category. He's always been capable of performing at a stupefying level, especially in short spurts. Envisioning him going nuclear in the playoffs for a few games is easy and realistic, and watching a guy perform that well on the big stage is enthralling and exciting, and it's easy to fall into that trap. But that's what the playoffs are. That's what makes them so special. Narratives. The breakneck speed buzzes us up. We may hate the regular season for being long and boring or whatever, but it sets us up perfectly for an enthralling experience every spring.